the water, the forest animals and birds. They each have their voice. They each have their story. A common story, centuries old. The story of the forest people. The people of the forest had many names. Ojibwa, Powhatan, Fox, Seminole, and many others. Each had different names. Each spoke different languages, but they all did many things alike. They were great hunters, hunting deer, moose, and other game animals. In the winter, northern tribes wore snowshoes for tracking and hunting. Some tribes used toboggans pulled by dogs. They fished the lakes and rivers, sometimes at night, with spears and torches. And they all made their homes from what the forest provided them, often using the bark of trees to cover their wigwams and teepees. They also made beautiful baskets from the bark of trees. Bowls were carved from wood. Wood was used for many items, a child's toy canoe. This gourd was used as a musical instrument. This is a beautifully carved flute. Some tribes carved unusual masks which were used in special ceremonies. Weapons were also made from the forest. These are war clubs. And from animals, the forest people made their clothing and ornaments. A shell necklace, a bear claw necklace, a deerskin ornament. The forest people felt closely related to all things in the natural world. They felt everything in the natural world had a spiritual life, and that everything was connected to everything else in a spiritual way. Who were the forest people? How did they get here? Where did they come from? Many Native Americans believe they've always lived on this continent since the beginning of time. But most anthropologists have a different view and accept the following theory. About 30,000 years ago, North America looked much as it does today. A narrow stretch of ocean separated Asia from this continent. Then ice began to advance across the northern hemisphere. As it did, sea levels dropped, exposing a land bridge connecting Asia with North America. Large game animals like bison and mammoth crossed this land bridge, entering the new continent, soon followed by Asian hunters. There were probably several migrations over thousands of years, and eventually the people spread throughout North and South America as the ice retreated and the land bridge became covered by water again. There were hundreds of tribes, but each can be classified into one of several groups, according to the natural environment in which they lived. The names of these groups are the Eastern Woodlands, the Plains, the Southwest, the Great Basin, the Plateau, California, and the Northwest Coast. Each of these groups lived in an environment that was unlike the others. None of the others lived in an environment quite like this one. The Eastern Woodlands, the land of the forest people. A land of vast forests, rivers, lakes, and streams. What would it have been like to have lived back then? To have lived like one of the woodland tribes, the Ojibwa, in the upper Great Lakes, hundreds of years ago.
That's my brother, Little Bear, coming back from hunting with my father. Boys get to do all the fun and exciting things. Girls, we do all the work. It's not fair. It's just not fair. By the way, my name is Wabagons. It means little flower. I hate that name. It's just not me. I mean, I would be the best hunter in our clan if they'd only let me. But they won't let me because they say hunting is for boys. It's just not fair. My brothers go hunting almost every day. They also get to set traps and snares. Here, my dad and brothers are setting a snare. First, a tree is bent over. Then the trigger is set. This has to be set very carefully. Finally, a noose is placed across an animal trail. When a small animal runs through the noose, it releases the snare. This is just a stick, but it could have easily been a rabbit. For larger animals, we might use a pit trap. Branches are first placed over a pit, and then they are covered with leaves. My father will then place some bait, in this case, a whitefish, directly over the trap. When an animal, like an opossum or raccoon, tries to get the bait, it'll fall into the trap. Trapping is fun, but today is a great day for hunting, and I know several good places just across the lake. But how do I get there? My father's canoe. I'm sure he wouldn't mind if I borrowed it. In fact, if I came back with a deer or even mukwa, that's what we call a bear, he would be very proud, and I would prove to everyone in our village that I'm the best hunter that ever lived. I remember the time my brother made his first kill. All the people were so excited. They treated him like a hero. And it was just a deer. The way everyone carried on, you would have thought it was mukwa. Today, I will make my first kill, and they will honor me instead of my brother. And it won't be a deer, it'll be mukwa. It's time for a girl to do some of the exciting and dangerous things. It seems like all we ever do is work. Like peeling bark. Every summer, my mother and I go to the forest to find birch trees that are ready for peeling. Before the bark is peeled, my mother first makes a tobacco offering to the Great Spirit, Gichimanido.
Manidu, Adaptanan, A'al, Asema.
Gichimanido provides us with all the things our people need, and we must always be thankful. My mother starts by making a cut in the birch using a stone knife. The knife is very sharp, but birch bark is very strong, and my mother usually has to repeat the cut in the same place. Even as she cuts, you can sometimes hear the bark popping underneath. When the cut is complete, the bark seems to almost pop off the tree, with just a little bit of help. When done properly, bark peeling will not kill the birch. This tree will eventually seal itself. We use large sections of bark like this to cover our wigwams. Wigwams are made each season when we move our camp. Saplings are bent over and tied together with yigub. That's the inner bark of the basswood tree. and it's very strong. This forms the basic frame of the wigwam. Cross branches are then added to give the wigwam greater strength. As you might have guessed, women are the ones who put up wigwams. Since this is a summer wigwam, my mother will unroll a cattail skirt around the bottom. The cattails will allow a little wind to blow through the wigwam, helping to keep it cool. Finally, birch bark sections are added to the frame, starting just above the skirt. My mother uses a bone awl to punch holes in the bark. And then she slips in a wee-goob strip to tie the bark to the frame. It'll take over 30 sections of bark to completely cover a wigwam. We also use birch bark to make our baskets and containers. First, a guide is placed over a section of bark. A burned stick is used to trace the outline. A stone knife is then used to cut the outline out. It doesn't look much like a basket yet, but it will. The basket has to be folded, and holes are punched using a bone awl. A wooden peg is used to keep the flaps together until they can be stitched with wee-goob. A well-made basket like this can be used for many things and might last a lifetime. Many of our things are made out of birch bark. Even this cradle board. It is said that Gichimanido gave us the birch tree so that we would never do without. But sometimes Gichimanido does not favor us. We may have poor luck hunting or trapping, or our herbs and medicines are unable to cure the sick. It is then we must seek the help of a spiritual elder. The elder has special knowledge of the spirit world and calls upon spirit helpers to help him purify the bodies of those who are contaminated. The elder works very hard, sometimes for days before he is successful. The spiritual elder performs other duties as well. When my mother builds a new wigwam, the elder will bless it and all the people living there with burning sweetgrass. Sweetgrass is considered sacred by our people, and we use it in many of our ceremonies. I think I better tie up the canoe. This looks like a good spot. Should be plenty of makwa around here. I was saying how women do most of the work. Another job my mother does is fire making. She does this by placing dry grass between two sections of wood and then inserting a spinning stick into a small bow. The bow will enable my mother to spin much faster than she could without it. The spinning causes the wood to heat up. If you've ever rubbed your hands together real fast, you know how rubbing causes heat. If you spin the stick fast enough and long enough, the wood gets very hot, causing the dry grass to smoke. Then, at just the right moment, my mother will stop spinning and blow on the smoking grass, not too hard and not too little, until a flame appears. I've seen my mother do this 1,000 times, and it still amazes me. It's a simple job of adding twigs and sticks until you have a real fire. After the fire's made, it's time to cook dinner. We usually start by boiling some water. By the way, as long as there's water in the birch basket, it won't burn. Then, we might add some meat, in this case, deer meat. To this, we'll add some greens, like wild onions and roots, and one of our favorites, wild rice. This will make a very nice stew. I told you that men and boys never work. Well, hardly ever. They do make tools and weapons, if you could call that work. This is a fish trap my father is making. Once fish swim into the trap, they can't get out. Traps are left overnight, just a short distance from shore. Sticks are stuck in the water to direct the fish toward the trap. In the morning, it's just a simple job of wading out to the trap, opening the door, and collecting fish. Some are bigger than others. A simple thing like a bone provides us with another way of catching fish. After the bone is sharpened, it's tied to another section of bone. The result is a very effective fish hook. Another way we fish is with a net. The net is usually strung out at night, and fish are pulled in the next morning. Spearing is another way we catch fish. A spear normally has 3 points. The 2 outer points spread apart and then close to keep the fish on the spear. Spearing is practically always done at night. A birch bark torch is attached to the front of the canoe. Fish are attracted to the light. All the spearer has to do is wait for the right moment. We also have time for games. Our favorite boys' game is target practice. It's not only fun, but it teaches boys to become good hunters. Spear throw is another game that teaches boys to become good hunters. Every once in a while, the boys will give me a chance, but I hate to show them up. I'm just about the best spear thrower in our village. I'm also just about the best at foot racing. And as far as double ball, I'm just about the best at this too. The idea is to pass the double ball to a teammate using a throwing stick and to keep it away from your opponents. One of my favorite games is lacrosse. The game is played with rackets and a ball. The team that scores the most goals wins. The boys hate it when we beat them. I almost forgot to mention, the forest is filled with danger. If I'd been captured, I would have been taken prisoner by another tribe. Just between you and me, I like it just fine in my own village, even if they don't let me do dangerous and exciting things.
Little Flower would make it safely back to her village. But little did she know that her family was one of the last generations to live in the old ways. A new people, the Europeans, were about to enter America. And when they did, the way of the forest people would never be the same again. Wanting the land occupied by Indians, the new Americans engaged in a series of conflicts that would eventually result in the complete conquest of the forest people and all Native Americans. Indians everywhere were forced to give up their way of life and to live on small reservations, areas of land set aside for Indians. No longer able to hunt and fish in the old ways, the Indians were rationed food and clothing by the government. Some government agents who were supposed to help the Indians were dishonest. They stole money and supplies, so the Indians never got all that they were entitled to. As a result, the Indians lived in total poverty, and many starved. Tribes were forced to give up many of their traditions and could no longer perform many of their religious rites and ceremonies. Many Indian children were separated from their families and were sent to strict boarding schools where they were forced to give up their Indian ways. In the 1950s, the government encouraged Native Americans to relocate to the nation's cities, where they could find jobs and live in modern ways. But not all Indians chose to do this. Today, Indians can live anywhere they want, and many choose to live off reservations in cities and towns, employed in the same sorts of jobs as other Americans. But many Native peoples prefer to remain on reservations. Today, more than 500,000 Indians live on reservations located throughout the United States. Life here is much better than it used to be, and in some ways is similar to life anywhere else. Indians drive cars and live in modern dwellings like other Americans. They dress in modern clothing. They shop in stores. They go to movies. Many attend Christian churches. Indian children go to schools that look like schools anywhere and study the same kinds of subjects. They play the same sorts of games and enjoy the same things as other American children. While reservation life is a lot like life anywhere else, there are some big differences. Unemployment is very high. On some reservations, 4 out of 5 people are out of work. And because of it, alcoholism and poverty are widespread. In recent years, many tribes have opened gambling casinos in order to create jobs and bring in additional income. But only a few tribes, those near major cities, have actually profited from casinos. Another problem found on many reservations is a lack of self-esteem and identity. That's why many Indians are attempting to gain a new sense of pride in being Indian. On many reservations, Indians are rediscovering ancient ceremonies like the burning of sage. By purifying themselves, their materials, and their tools in the smoke of this plant, they feel they will be able to make better and more beautiful things. Indians continue to offer tobacco to the Great Spirit. Some forest people continue to peel the bark of birch trees, just as their ancestors had done before them. Birch trees peel the easiest in the summer, but it still takes a skilled hand to remove large sections in one piece. The bark will be used to make a variety of items that can be sold to tourists, like this beautiful birch bark wastebasket, this miniature canoe, and even this full-size canoe, which is a replica of those paddled by Indians hundreds of years ago. Most Indians buy their canoes today, and they're usually made of fiberglass or aluminum. And instead of hunting with bows and arrows, modern Indians use rifles and shotguns. The eastern woodlands is dotted with countless lakes that have provided native peoples a way of life for thousands of years and continue to do so. Fishing nets have been used by Indians for countless generations and enable them to gather large numbers of fish in a short time. Today, wild rice is still being gathered in the same way it has been done for centuries. This simple method enables two people to gather a lot of rice in a short time. After it is gathered, the rice is then parched, which involves roasting the grains over an open fire. Ricing requires a lot of work for a little bit of rice, but the Indians who do it wouldn't want it any other way. Most reservations throughout the eastern woodlands conduct one or more powwows each year. Powwows are festive gatherings of Indians, and just about every powwow features traditional singing and dancing. It is in these ways that Native Americans hope to stay in touch with their traditions and regain their pride and self-esteem. Today, birch bark canoes seldom paddle these waters, and you no longer find the birch bark lodges that were once so plentiful. But while many of the old ways may be gone, the heart and spirit of the forest people live on. Little Flower never got to go night spearing with her father. But some 400 years later, a young girl, who could well be Little Flower's descendant, goes spearing almost every spring.